Hi and welcome back. In this video we're going to be having a look at your anxiety. Now what I'd like you to do is make a list of all the situations that you tend to get anxious in. And just pause the video now and make that list. It doesn't need to be a very long list, just a quick list of the kinds of situations you tend to get anxious in. So pause the video now, and then once you've made your list, come back and restart the video. Okay, welcome back. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go out and talk to some people, and I'd like you to find out what other people have anxieties about. So just pause the video again and go and find some people, just talk to one or two people and find out what kinds of things that make them anxious, whatever that happens to be. And I know it sounds like a weird kind of conversation, but people usually respond. Now what I think you're going to find is that different people have different anxieties. So for example, some people are frightened of flying and other people love it. Some people are frightened of public speaking and other people love it. Some people are frightened of spiders and other people collect them. Some people hate dentists and some people love them. So what does this mean? Well, actually what it means is that if your brain was hardwired for your anxiety, you would at least expect that everybody had the same or very similar types of anxieties. But they don't. Different people have different anxieties. And the other thing, which is really important, is everyone gets anxious about something. And everyone gets anxious about something because it's a normal part of being human, and it's actually a normal part of being a mammal. And everyone has different anxieties and fears. So what this means is that we learn our anxieties and fears, or what we call habituate them. Otherwise, you would expect everybody to have the same anxieties and fears, and because everybody have different anxieties and fears, it therefore means that it's not hardwired, we've learned it. Now there's some good news here, because if you've learnt the anxiety, it means you can unlearn it. So let's just think about this. You've actually done this many times before. It's a process called dishabituation. So when you first learnt to drive, probably the very first lesson you did is you sat there in the driver's seat with an instructor next to you or a family member next to you, and you looked at the array of dials and the pedals, 3 pedals and only 2 feet, the gear stick, the steering wheel, all these dials, trying to remember what they all do. And they expect you to look outside of the windscreen and notice where you're going and steer at the same time. And then when you got to your driving test, probably huge anxiety again. And now, if you do drive, what you'll find is you'll drive from A to B and there'll be no anxiety. Not only will there be no anxiety, but you'll probably drive from A to B, get to B, and have no memory whatsoever of the journey, because you've just done it all on autopilot. And again, there are other things that you probably got anxious about as a child or a teenager that don't make you anxious now at all. And as I mentioned before, this is a process called dishabituation. So let's just have a little look at dishabituation. Habituation is a learning process. It's the process by which we learn to get habits. And as you'll see shortly, we're actually full, absolutely full of habits. And this is how we got to where we are in the animal kingdom, like right at the top of the food chain. Because what we're really good at is learning. And by learning, what I mean is that we learn to do something and then we turn it into a habit. So we don't need to think about it anymore. It's just an automatic process, which means that we can then go on and learn something else and turn that into a habit. So what happens is, as we get older, we actually become a series of stacked habits that we just carry out automatically without thinking. Now, a habit is a very fast process because it doesn't need to go through the brain and it doesn't need to be thought about. So if something happens, we just click into it. So for example, when you're driving, you just happen to know now, because of experience, you're in the habit, you know when to change gear. Without even thinking about it, you do it automatically. No thought, you just do it. You know roughly when to brake. Of course, times we make mistakes and we brake a bit late, or we start breaking a bit soon, but usually it's pretty spot on. And this is the process of habituation, the process of learning. And this is how we've ended up with our fears. So we learn the fears, and if we do things that make those fears into a habit and strengthen those habits, then that's an habituation. Now, the opposite of an habituation is dishabituation. It's the removal of the habit. And as I said earlier, we do this naturally. Now, sometimes some of the habits get so strong, like your anxieties, for example, that you just over time isn't going to do it, or it's too painful for it to do over time. So one of the methods that used to be used for anxiety reduction for public speaking, for example, was getting people to go up on stage and speak on a daily basis. And very quickly what happens is that public speaking becomes dishabituated for that individual. And it's a process certainly I've used with individuals who have things like fear of elevators or lifts, escalators. Once we've got them on them and we can keep them on them over a shortened period of time, very quickly that fear dishabituates. What happens is avoidance strengthens habituation. So the less often that we approach something, and one of the problems with anxiety is it creates avoidance, so avoidance strengthens habituation. So I've got some homework for you. What I want you to do is I want you to find out what anxieties other people have, and I want you to notice that they are different to yours and that this is evidence of learning. And I also want you to notice that what you've already dishabituated over the years. So just kind of think back to your childhood and your teens and your younger adult life, depending on how old you are, and just notice the things that you've already dishabituated. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.